We have a lot to cover in today's video, including the latest NHL trade rumors regarding the Montreal Canadiens and potentially moving goalie Jake Allen, the latest on Vladimir Tarasenko and what teams he would wave to. We also got word that the Nashville Predators have a couple of their big contract players up for sale, and we also have lots of free agent rumblings as well, including the latest on the Minnesota Wild and their top RFAs, as well as the Maple Leafs and guys like Hyman and Anderson. More news regarding the expansion draft. We have a small trade and more. All that coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a ton of news today. So again, another video that's going to be a little longer. You're going to want to watch closely and pay close attention and watch all the way through because there really is a ton of information here in today's video. Now I'll get started here with a couple of quick hit items. We have a couple of news items out of the Boston Bruins organization. First up, defenseman Kevan Millar has announced his retirement. Millar was certainly a hard-nosed player, battled lots of injuries. He's 33 years old, played for about 7 or 8 seasons, played 332 NHL games, was certainly, like I said, a tough customer, battled through a lot, and because of all the injuries, it's not shocking to find out he's retiring at a little bit younger age than he probably would have preferred. But Kevan Millar's career is now officially over, but I think he can be proud of how he played and represented the Boston Bruins. And the Boston Bruins also announced that they've signed another defenseman, Brandon Carlo, who was bound to be an RFA, to a long-term contract extension. This one should work out pretty good as well. They got him on a 6-year deal at a $4.1 million average annual value. So to me, for a second pair right shot defenseman, that's pretty good value. Carlo certainly brings a lot. I do have a little bit of concerns over his concussion history, of course. So hopefully that can be in the past and he can move forward here and stay healthy. That would be the real only concern about the player, because otherwise he's a real nice addition to that blue line. I know in an interview he did make comments suggesting that he'd like to have a defense partner that would be a little bit more capable offensively, so that they're not going to be regarded strictly as a shutdown pair. He said he'd like to be able to play more in all situations, so getting the right partner, right fit for him to be able to do that would be kind of on his wish list, so to speak. But we know that the Bruins are likely going to be making other tweaks here to their blue line before the start of the season, so I would imagine that the Bruins already recognize that as a potential area to improve upon. But that's a pretty good contract signing for a young blue liner. That's a huge part of the team's core right now, as well as their future. So to me, that's a real good signing. One last thing for them to worry about as they now turn their attention to players like Krejci and Hall in the trade market, which they've certainly got their hand in a fair bit of stuff here and tough decisions to make. Goaltending, they have a lot going on in Boston. So to get the Carlo contract out of the way, especially ahead of expansion, make sure he's obviously going to be protected regardless. Just to get that out of the way would be good for them. So that's your Bruins update here for now. Also got a little bit of news regarding the expansion draft, including that Buffalo Sabres forward Jeff Skinner has agreed to waive his no-move clause for the Sabres for the expansion draft purposes only, of course. So he will be exposed. So that's certainly going to help the Buffalo Sabres, although I don't think they were really in too grave danger to really lose a real significant piece. But clearly with the Sabres going in the direction that they are, certainly retooling and kind of rebuilding here, they don't want to lose anybody that's a younger asset. And obviously a guy like Skinner, who's a little bit older on a not so great contract, obviously came in, had a real good first year, then things really tanked from there. So hopefully the coaching staff can get him going here for the future. But for right now, that's looking like a terrible contract at the moment, and it certainly could have boxed out then potentially losing another younger player that they might have preferred not to and would have preferred to protect, which they can now do. So good on Jeff Skinner for doing the right thing in that regard, because I can't imagine in a million years that Ron Francis and the Kraken would want that. If anybody's more familiar with Jeff Skinner and when he was most successful, it would be Francis, but I don't see him touching him at that price tag. But good news there. Now we also got word that Keith Yandel was not asked to waive his for the Florida Panthers, which is very surprising given the fact that they're certainly looking to end that relationship, you could say. Florida is certainly wanting to move on from the Yandel contract, still has 2 years left, but many think that maybe they might have some sort of handshake agreement where they don't really need to do that. If you look at their blue line, without Yandel being protected, the players impacted are guys like Nudavara and maybe Gudis. So one of them could be protected as an extra guy here instead of both of them being exposed, because like Uyghur and Ekblad will be the other two 100% that will be on your protected list. So obviously that poses a bit of an issue, but to me it signifies that they're probably not really worried about it, because the most likely scenario that looks to be unfolding here is that goaltender Chris Driedger, even though he's a UFA, he still can be exposed. And if the Kraken talk to him during their period that they're allowed to and come to a contract agreement, he can count as the player selected from Florida. So they may not lose an additional player. So they might actually be pretty lucky here in that regard. And if they're thinking that it's likely going to be Dreger that's taken, then Yandel waiving the no move really isn't important. So I know some kind of looked at that as being odd, but you know what? Either way, many feel he won't be back for Florida next year, whether or not they proceed with a buyout or find a trade for him. But he's definitely more than likely not going to be a Panther next year. Now, we also saw a small trade today as well. The Edmonton Oilers sending a young goaltender, Dylan Wells, to the Carolina Hurricanes. Obviously, the Hurricanes needed a goaltender for expansion draft purposes, so they went and found a depth piece here that another team didn't really have to keep on board. I mean, the Oilers have some other younger goalies ahead of them on their depth list here, so certainly somebody they could afford to lose. But when it comes to Carolina, they got Nedeljkovic, who they were going to be protecting, of course, but then we have Mrazek and Reimer are both unrestricted free agents, so there's no point in even considering that, and you have to be under contract to be exposed, right? So that doesn't count. And then if you go through their list here, like, they have some other guys, but none of them were signed. So if you look at their prospect list, they do have a guy who technically they could have signed, which is Jeremy Helvig, who's been in the organization now for a few years. But instead of signing him, I think they're kind of distancing themselves right now, or at least holding off before anything comes to be, because he was apparently arrested in Florida and is apparently being investigated for some charges potentially involving like a dating violence type of situation. And I believe that battery is the actual official charge. So, obviously they're kind of waiting to see how that plays out before they even consider making a contract offer. So they can't do that. So they needed somebody. They picked up Wells from Edmonton. The return is only future consideration. So it may or may not turn out to be much of anything going down to the Oilers in the future. More than likely, won't be much. Now, we had another signing today as well. The Pittsburgh Penguins have also signed forward Carlo Blueger to a 2-year contract at $2.2 million per season. So that's a pretty nice signing. Blueger's been a player who's improved a fair bit and slowly become, a decent part of their team over the past couple of years. So that's a good signing for them. It's a pretty fair value for what they bring from him. Obviously, that will impact, potentially some decisions on the expansion draft. I know the Penguins are a team that could be very interesting in that regard. I mean, they've got a couple of goalies like Jerry and DeSmith, so, they're likely going to be making a change in some regard in that position. And they've got some forwards that might be the guy that's picked. It's hard to say. And actually, the Penguins are going to be one of the teams we look at as early as tomorrow in one of our deep dive analysis videos for the expansion draft. So stay tuned for that. But the Blueger signings, to me, is good value, and we'll see how it impacts things on making their decisions on who to protect for the expansion draft. Now, before we jump into the rumors section of today's video, we do need to pause for a moment and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. So thanks very much for watching that promotional video. I greatly appreciate it. Before we jump into the trade talk, we have a couple of free agent rumor updates here for you today. The Minnesota Wild, of course, want to get their star restricted free agent that they were waiting so long for to come over, Kirill Kaprizov, under contract. Now, he's only played the 1 year, but he was Rookie of the Year, had a dominant season, showed flashes of being a superstar. He's going to be a big deal in the NHL and could be for a substantial period of time. Based on what we saw, like he's a superstar in the making here, but he still has only played one season. Certainly has some ways to go, in my opinion, before he can really be a bona fide superstar, and really solidify himself with that type of reputation. But the contract negotiations are not going well. We had heard before that the agent for Kaprizov had already kind of threatened that he can go back to Russia and play, which, there's also was reports about the negotiations going cold. That came from Kevin Weeks from NHL Network, as we reported before. And of course, his former agent is Kaprizov's current agent, so that the agent was likely feeding the information to Weeks in that regard to get the information out to the media. But the latest now from Michael Russo of The Athletic says that he has turned down a 8-year contract offer valued at $9 million per season. That is a pretty substantial contract. So apparently, according to the information that Russo has, is he would prefer something around that 4-year mark and likely around $9 to $10 million because he sees himself as being a $10 to $11 million player in the not too distant future, like in the next few years. That's probably what he's looking at. So he wants a short-term contract, at some pretty big money here, and then figures he can get even more again in a few years' time when the cap finally starts to hopefully go up a little bit. And if you look at the Minnesota Wild cap situation, obviously it changed a lot over the last day or so with the buyouts of Parise and Suter. The next year is going to be much better, but then you've got years 2, 3, and 4 of that buyout is going to hurt. So they are going to be needing a lot of cheaper contracts for sure. So I don't know how exactly they're planning to manage all this. We're going to have to wait and see what moves Guerin makes. But obviously this is a tough situation. They've already got Kevin Fiala also needing to be signed, and rumor has it he's looking for around 7 or better on his contract. These guys had a good year, obviously, yes, but they're looking for a ton of cash, and it's going to really put the Wild in a really tough spot here. So, that's some big money for Kaprizov to be turning down. I don't imagine he can make anywhere near that in the KHL, so I really don't think they're a significant risk here to lose him back to Russia, but at the same time, something has to give because, they have to come to something that's fair agreement. But I understand why he wants a shorter term. I have no issues there. But the AAV the guy's looking for after one season in the NHL is a lot. And as I said before, I can see the flashes of superstardom and how he could be that kind of player. But, I think you need to establish yourself a little bit more before you can start putting yourself right at the top of the league with the highest paid players. That's a big jump. So we'll see how negotiations go in the next little while here. Hopefully they can get something done and it doesn't take too long, because I know the longer it goes, this is going to stress out the fan base. But on to the Maple Leafs, the latest word here from a couple of players from Pierre LeBrun of TSN and as well as The Athletic. He said apparently the things are still not going well with Zach Hyman. There's been no progress. All indications now point that he's definitely heading to market and won't return to the Leafs. That's unless something drastic changes. So they're going to have to come up substantially in any offers. And the only way they're going to do that would be to move out a big contract. And I don't see in the next week or two something drastic and seismic happening where they move like a Mitch Marner or Nylander or something to that effect. So to me, it's pretty much a given, but you can't say 100% that Hyman is going to be gone. And when it comes to Freddie Anderson as well, there was early reports that the two sides wanted to talk and maybe he would stay in Toronto. But then after talks got going, he was looking for $5+ million. He was looking for at least what he made before, if not a bit of a raise. And the Leafs can't do that. There's just no way they can afford it, even if they think he's worth it, which at this point I'd be skeptical that he is, because it's just been so inconsistent and, injury riddled the last year. Maybe on a shorter term deal, I'd consider it, but the Leafs just can't afford that and to keep the rest of the roster filled out. So they're going to have to likely go in a different direction. And right now, all signs indicate that he's definitely going to market. Now, if he goes to market and when free agency opens and there's nobody's coming or knocking with anything close, then maybe he'll take a cheap contract and stay in Toronto for a 1-year deal or something. But I would think the odds of that are probably slim given all the needs for goaltending around the NHL, but only time will tell. Now, when it comes to trades, apparently the Nashville Predators are certainly open for business. We've already seen them trade Victor Arvidsson. We've already heard rumblings about other deals, maybe a side deal with Seattle so they don't lose one of their preferred defensemen. That is a problem for them on the blue line. They've had a strong blue line for many, many years. And to think about all the guys that they've moved on from, like with this recent buyout of Ryan Suter, imagine they've had Ryan Suter, they've had Shea Weber, they've had Seth Jones. Imagine if all three of those guys were still there, plus they drafted Roman Josi. They get Ryan Ellis through the draft too. would have been a crazy blue line, and it makes sense that they all couldn't have likely stayed anyways, but it's what a defense factor that team has been. But obviously that's the area of the team they want to protect. Goaltending, Saros is the guy, there's no question there. Rene just retired. They have to figure out a backup for him, but that's not too huge a deal, at least not right off the bat here. But the forward group is where the problem lies, and apparently they would love to be able to move on from one or both of Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson. It's believed that at least one, if not both of them, will be exposed in the expansion draft. I would have my doubts that the Kraken would, pick up on that and take one of them. I guess you never know, but it's doubtful given the big money that's involved. At the same time, though, a trade was going to be difficult unless Nashville's willing to eat some salary. A buyout would get expensive. They just seen what the Wild did. I don't know if they want to do anything like that. I mean, that's really out of character for Nashville to really retain or to do something drastic in that regard. So we'll see if they break character here and go in a new direction. But those two guys are just not working out for the money they're getting paid. I've been saying it for years. As soon as Johansson got that contract, it's like, you know what? I like him as a player, but not for that price. Matt Duchene had his moments, but it seems like, I have serious issues with his character myself. I've been skeptical of this guy for a long time. He just seems to be, to me, the kind of guy that worked really hard to get that contract and then took his foot off the gas. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't have, fond thoughts of Matt Duchene. And I think both these guys will be extremely tough to move, and I don't blame David Poile for exploring it. It's just a matter of, can they find any takers? Would a team come along at 50% retention? Maybe. That's probably about their only hope. But even then, if they retain a bunch of salary, they're probably going to expect a bigger return, and that, it's going to be hard for teams. So we'll see. But the Predators are certainly open for business and looking to move out some big money here. Now, there's also word from insiders like Elliot Friedman about Montreal, wondering if they might move goalie Jake Allen just because they're afraid to lose him in expansion. Not because they want to. I don't think the Montreal Canadiens would want to have that scenario. But at the same time, if they really get the feeling from Seattle that he's going to be the guy they pick, they don't want to lose him for nothing. I mean, he was a huge part of their team, and even though Carey Price took the ball and ran with it in the playoffs, which is what we all expected, he missed a lot of time during the regular season and didn't play the best at times, and Jake really was a huge part of getting them to the playoffs, which is just as important. You can't have everything come together and go on a run if you don't get there in the first place. So to me, he was extremely important. They got him signed at a cheaper cap hit than when they acquired him from St. Louis for 2 more years. Like, he would be a great fit to stay there. They don't want to lose him, but there's a lot of teams around the league that could use a goalie. The only problem here is that you can only protect one goalie in expansion. So there's not too many teams out there where you could trade him and they can make him their top goalie and protect him. That's not something that is going to be easy to do. I mean, look at a team like maybe Buffalo, for example. Buffalo doesn't really have a clear-cut goalie. Like Allmark's a UFA. They agreed to talk again, but there's no certainty on his future. Like, they could probably do it, but there's not many out there that could. So, unless you can get a good enough return to justify it from the few teams that are able to, it's probably unlikely to happen. But it's something that, according to Friedman, he thinks that they're at least considering and looking at. So we'll have to see here. I mean, teams have a couple more days before the roster freeze goes into effect for expansion, because the Kraken obviously are going to have a few days here to mull over the list before they make their decisions on who they're going to select. So I believe it's Saturday, sometime this Saturday coming, when the freeze takes effect. So the next couple of days, we might see some activity based on expansion draft implications, but we'll see what the Habs do. I'm going to say that this is probably at 50-50 at best that it happens, just because of the lack of teams that could actually protect him if they acquired him from Montreal anyways. And now lastly, I want to touch on Vladimir Tarasenko. We had some updates here come across Twitter just before I was recording this video. Some of it came from Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic covering the Blues. Looking at the Tarasenko situation, it's believed that Tarasenko did provide a list to the Blues on teams he would consider waiving his no-move clause for to go to via trade. Now, we had talked before when this first came out, because there was rumors about Tarasenko before the news was made official that he asked for a trade. It was been swirling around the rumor mill for probably a week, maybe closer to 2 weeks exactly, before that became officially confirmed by enough sources. So there was rumors about a list that he had provided, and there was certain teams on it. And I said from the get-go, this list to me, half the teams on it don't make any sense. So we now have what appears to be, at least according to Rutherford, a more confirmed list of the teams that Tarasenko would consider going to, and that list certainly includes a lot of teams in the East. There's not too many in the West. So the teams include some teams that we've already discussed, some potential trade rumors that he's been linked to, like the New York Islanders. They are on this list, as well as the New York Rangers. I think the Islanders are more likely of the two to make a deal, but I can understand why he would be interested in going to either one. The Capitals are on this list, like I mentioned a long time ago when this first surfaced. For him to go play with his buddy Ovechkin in the Capitals organization and for them to work together towards another cup, to me, makes sense. You've also got both teams in Florida, the Lightning and the Panthers, are both on this list. The Lightning have their own issues. I can understand why he'd go there or want to, but that's not going to happen, at least very unlikely given the cap situation. Florida would be a little bit easier to work with. They don't have a ton of room, but still, at least they have enough contracts they can move easier to maybe make it work. Like St. Louis and Tampa, I guess I shouldn't say it wouldn't happen. Tampa would just have to have St. Louis take back a lot of money and 2 to 3 other players to make it work. It's not impossible. It's just, I'm not sure St. Louis would want that because some feel that the Blues might prefer maybe not taking back a ton of money so that they can maybe go after a guy like Landeskog in free agency if he makes it there. That they might want to spend that money in other directions rather than take a big contract back. But a lot of it will probably depend on what the offer is too. I think they kind of have to weigh out all the options here. So that gets us to 5 teams. Number 6 would be the Boston Bruins. We've talked about that connection, as I've said before. I can see that maybe being a fit, but I think it's only going to be something that the Bruins do if they don't sign Hall. Because if they want to bring back Hall and Krejci, I don't know if getting Tarasenko in there is really going to work mathematically. Doubtful, but that's just my opinion. And of course, another team would be Vegas. Again, I understand the allure for him to go there. Very tough financially, but they'd have to move out something substantial to the Blues to make that happen. And then the Philadelphia Flyers are the other team. Now, the Flyers, again, they've got a lot of things that they're working on, certainly looking for a shakeup. I know a guy like Jake Voracek's available. Would they consider that kind of a swap? I don't know if St. Louis would do that, but those apparently are the 8 teams on his list that we know of right now. Doesn't mean a deal is imminent with any of them. It just means that those are teams he would consider waiving his clause in his contract to accept. I would say, based on what we've heard, the most dialogue appeared to be around teams like the Islanders or the Bruins, maybe the Capitals, but the other ones, you can't rule it out either. Once they know they're kind of on his list, if they're interested, they'll see what they can do to make it work. So we'll see, but it's certainly going to be another interesting player to watch here as we go through the offseason. Let me know your thoughts on everything discussed in today's video down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.